Hey guys, welcome to GetintheMix and our first video in our Native Instruments series. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the Maschine Mikro MK3, just giving a general overview of its features, giving you a kind of step-by-step guide on how to use, and just kind of taking a look at the unit. It's a great little bit of hardware for those of us that want to do a bit of production or performance, but want to get outside the box a little bit. When I say outside the box, I mean away from the laptop. It gives you a really hands-on way to sketch out ideas. It's great for bass lines, drums, synths, and all sorts of other things. Now the first thing we're going to look at is browsing sounds. Now the majority of the browsing is done via the mouse and the laptop. Native Instruments have broken down all their sounds into different categories that we can search via. We've got projects, groups, which tend to be drum kits, things like that. Sounds, which tend to be samples and synths and things. Instruments, which is synths, sampled instruments, various kind of contact sounds, all sorts of things like that. Effects and samples. Then these are broken down into factory and user. So you kind of got the ones that Native Instruments have provided in terms of their packs, their expansion packs, their contact sounds, and ones that you've created and saved yourself. Now, to scroll through, one other thing I will mention is that you are able to favorite sounds by clicking on the little star next to a sound. And then when you click on this star here in the browser, or alternatively the little star on the MK3 itself, you're then able to navigate through your favorite sounds with ease. Now, first things first is I'm going to load a drum kit. So I'm going to head to my user sounds, and I'm going to head to this CTK14, which is a nice chilled trap kit. Very nice. The next thing we'll look at is the pads. Now, Native Instruments have got these beautiful 16 touch sensitive and velocity sensitive pads. Now, what velocity sensitivity means is that the harder you hit the pad, the louder that's going to play. So if I really gently, you can barely hear it, but if I give it a nice hit, we get it nice and loud. And that's great for creating dynamics in your sounds. We don't want everything to be at a fixed volume. However, if we did want everything at a fixed volume, all we've got to do is click the fixed volume button at the top of this strip, and we can then choose the volume that we have it at. So when I click volume, I can use the encoder to set the velocity of those sounds. Now, I don't want a fixed velocity, I want it to be dynamic. So we'll keep that off. Brilliant. There are four main ways in which you will use the pads on the Maschine Mikro. You have pad mode, which gives you direct access to the 16 sounds on your pad. We have keyboard mode, which pitches whatever sound we're currently on up the keyboard. We have chord mode that allows us to create chords and harmonies. And we have a step sequencer mode that works like a conventional drum kit, whereby I can program drums in and they will play it for me. We can take those out again. When we're in keyboard mode, one feature we can look at, if I hold group to create a new group, which is it can be another set of sounds that will allow us to kind of have them and control them separately. I can then head over to sounds, click on factory and head to my favorites. Now I'm going to load in this first thing I'm going to load in this West Coast piano reverb sound. Now, we can hear that's just a single keyboard note. However, if I click keyboard, we got all the notes. However, if I head to my rotary encoder and keep an eye on the LED screen and use these left and right buttons, I can navigate through different options for the keyboard. So we have the root note, of course, at the moment. I have it set to A2, can go as low as I like and as high as I like. For now, we'll leave it on A2 there. Then we can choose the bank. Do I want it to be main, modes, jazz, world, 5 tones? What kind of scales do I want to work with? I can go across the type. Do I want it to be Ionian, Dorian, Pythagorean, whatever. We're going to keep with Ionian. And for bank, we're going to go main, and I'm going to go minor. Now, what this means is that all these notes are going to be in the minor scale. I'm actually going to go for minor pentatonic because it's a very common scale used within dance music. Now, if I head over and create another group by holding group and clicking on empty products, I can then load in another sound. And once again, if I click my favorites there, I can head to my favorite sounds. I'm going to load in this super lead sound. Again, we can tell that's just one single note. However, if I press chords, again, I can use the encoder to set the root note. I'm going to stick with A2. I'm going to go across to mode. Now, do I want it in harmonizing mode or chord mode? Do I want to create conventional chord patterns, or do I want to create harmonies with existing chords? Now, for this sound, I'm going to go for chord, because I want to make a chord pattern. And then press the right arrow to navigate to the type of chord. This gives me an option of major 1 to 8 and minor 1 to 8. And these are different variations of the chord patterns. I'm going to stick with minor 1. And now if you notice, when I press the key, it's not that single note that we heard before, but it's in fact a whole chord. Very lush, very full sound. And this is great for getting ideas down in regards to those, some of us aren't as musically inclined. We might not be able to generate those chords off the top of our heads, but this gives us a nice way to create them, have a little fiddle around and just see what works with the songs that you're making and help you get ideas down. The step sequencer mode works in much the same way as the majority of step sequencers. If I click on the note that I want to program in, I can then program that in. When I press play, that will play. If I go back to pad mode and click on the snare, I can put the snares in on every other beat. Hi-hats. And you get the idea. You're able to program a beat. So if you don't want to play stuff in, if maybe you're not so great with timing and you want it to create the beat for you, you can program what you want in. Now we're going to remove this for now. The first thing you'll be wanting to do once you've kind of got accustomed to using the pads and the different pad modes is to record patterns in. Now, to record a pattern, I simply have to click on the pattern button and click a blank square to create a new pattern. I had already clicked on that, so it was already existing, but if I click on a new pattern, it will create me a new one. I can then choose the length of that pattern using the rotary encoder here. Now I'm going to go back to the original one, and I'm going to set that to be a 4-bar loop. Click back on my pad mode, which means I'm now ready to record. Now, if I press play, that will play through the pattern. I have a metronome that I can turn off via shift and the tap button there. You can see that turns my metronome off. Now, some people want to play with metronome because it will help them keep in time. Some people won't need it because they're great at timing. Personally, I'm not amazing, so I'm going to turn the metronome back on. However, there is one more feature to recording. If I hold shift and then press record, it will give me a count in. So it will give me, I can set this in the preferences whether I want it to be 1 bar or 2 bars, count in to help me prepare for recording. So I'm going to press shift and record. Now once that's recorded in, I can use various shortcuts to control factors on that. I don't know if you noticed there, but I held shift and pressed pad number 5 to quantize that. Now what quantization does is snaps those notes to the nearest bar. However, if I wanted to retain some of that human element, I could press shift and pad number 6, which would quantize that by 50%. On top of this, I could press shift and number 9 to clear all of the recording that I've done there. I can do shift and undo to just undo segment by segment, so it would undo the last loop of recording that I did. I have a few other buttons here that we can cover as well. We can use copy and paste, again using shift to access those features, and nudge to nudge notes around. I can also use shift and octaves to increase my octaves when in keyboard mode. The next thing you might need to know when coming in terms of recording is how to erase notes. Obviously, I've mentioned that you can clear out using the clear shortcut and the undo shortcut, but we can also in turn clear using the step sequencer. Where I've recorded that beat, it has now placed those notes on my step sequencer. I could simply remove them by clicking them and pop them back in. Another nice way of erasing notes is when I'm playing a track. If I hold the erase button and the note that I want to erase, the play bar will act as a scrubber. This will remove that note as it comes along. I'll give you an example now. I'm going to remove the snare. So I simply hold the snare, press play, and then hold erase. And you can see that I erased those snares as we went in. Now I'm going to pop those snares back in, because for the purpose of this, I do want snares in my beat. I use my encoder on the step sequencer to switch to the next set. So I'm on 1 out of 4 now for my grid. I'll tip to 2 out of 4, 3 out of 4, and 4 out of 4. Now my beat is back recorded in there. At this point, the beat is there to keep me nice and steady, so I can turn the metronome off. I'm simply holding shift and clicking tap. The majority of what we do on Maschine is based around the ideas of patterns and scenes. Now we can think of scenes as different sections of a song, intros, breakdowns, drops, verses, etc, etc. I simply click on scene to access the scene selection view. Now we can see that at the moment I only have one scene created, but if I click on this white square here, it creates a second scene for myself. Within a scene, we deal with patterns. Now, as we saw earlier, we click on the pattern button and click a blank square to make a new pattern. However, there are other uses for the pattern. The idea of patterns is based around the idea that in dance music, we work with loops, building up loops, and developing our songs as they go on. Now, I've obviously already created this first drum pattern under pattern number 1. However, if I click the duplicate button, and hold the duplicate button, may I say, and click on that, it flashes to say that I'm acting on pattern 1. If I then click onto a blank square, it will copy that pattern over. Now when I go back to my pad mode and press play, making sure that I'm in this pattern, you can hear that I have the same beat there. Perhaps I want to add something into this beat that isn't on the last beat so that I can bring it in as a development. So if I hold press record, we have that now recorded in. However, clicking on pattern, I can switch back at any point to the pattern without that little percussion sound. And back, and here it is. This gives us a great way to build our tracks up, to get different ideas down, and again, kind of get a way of getting those ideas into the computer and down on paper. The final feature that I'd like to look at in patterns is the ability to double up a pattern. So this is currently, looking at my first pattern, we can see on the encoder here that it's a 4-bar pattern. The writing underneath the word is what happens when you hold shift and press that button. So in this case, we hold shift and press duplicate, and that doubles up the length of my pattern. My pattern is now an 8-bar pattern. So now we've got that basic drum pattern recorded there, we're going to work on getting some sounds on. Looked at pad mode and keyboard mode and chord mode and step mode, but let's get some of these basic ideas recorded down. So if I click on group C by holding group and clicking on the third group, I can move to chord mode. I then click pattern and click in my first one to create my 4-bar pattern, again using the rotary encoder here to set the displayed on the LED. Click back to chord mode and shift and record for my counting. Now that's recorded in, we'll get a melody over the top. I'll hold group and I'll click the second group, which takes us back to group B. I don't know if you remember, but we had our keyboard sound set up in a minor pentatonic scale. Now this is a great time to show you another brilliant feature of Maschine. It has a built-in arpeggiator. An arpeggiator plays a melody for you. To simply enact the arpeggiator, all I have to do is hold down the notes that I want to be inside the arpeggiator and hold shift and the note repeat /ARP button. That creates a melody for me. Using the LED here, I can go through various different settings. I can choose the type. Do I want the arpeggiator to just go up? Do I want it to just go down? Up, then down? Or do I want it to be played? I want it to go up, then down. As I add new notes into the arpeggiator, they are also added in to the melody. If I press the right button on the navigation button, I can then choose the rate of my arpeggiator. Do I want it to be in 1 bar, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, 32? In this case, I'm going to go for 16th notes. Then finally, I can choose the unit of notes. Do I want it to be normal, triplets, dotted? I'm going to go for normal. I'm going to record this in. I'll simply press Shift and record for my count-in. That's created another layer. Next we're going to look at Native's new flagship feature on the Maschine MK3, the touch sensitive strip here. Now this has 4 main features: pitch, modulation, perform effects and notes. When I have it on pitch mode, I simply press a note and use the touch strip to change the pitch of that note. When I have it on mod wheel, the strip acts like a modulation wheel, whereby when I use the strip, parameters are affected within the synth. In this instance, I can click the note and add a vibrato to the note. The main feature of the touch sensitive strip is the perform effects. The perform effects have 8 different effects built in: filters, flanges, burst echoes, resos, ring, stutter and scratcher. If I have a chord sequence playing like we recorded in earlier, I'm able to affect the cutoff of the filter with my strip. This is great for getting ideas down that maybe would be a little bit hard to pencil in by hand on the computer. If I wanted to record that implementation in, I simply press play, record and hold the automation button and reenact my parameters. The final feature of the touch sensitive strip is the notes function. This works ideally with individual notes. So we've got the piano sound over here. I can hold the notes that I want to be affected by it and use the strip to play those notes, tapping or sliding along the strip to play back those notes in a fashion that I might not normally be able to by hand. This is another great way of getting ideas down. From there, the volume levels aren't quite what we want, so next we'll look at the mixing section. If I click volume, this allows us to control the volume of various sounds, groups, or the project overall. On default, it allows us to control the project's volume via this encoder. I'll set that to -2. I can then affect group volumes individually by holding group, clicking in the group I want to affect, and turning it down. I might turn the drums down by a couple of dB. Quite importantly though, I'll turn the chords down because they're overpowering in comparison to the other sounds at the moment. So I will turn the chords down by around -12. Let's see how that sounds. Much better, and it's sitting at a nicer volume. There are a few other controls in regards to mixing. I can click tempo to affect the tempo of my track. At the moment it's on 95, perhaps I want to boost it up. We'll put it to 105. A little bit fast, so what we'll do there is pop it to 100. I can then choose the swing. Swing is the human element to a recording. Do I want it to be just straight, or do I want it to have a little bit of rhythm to it and be a little bit offbeat? In this case, I'm going to head to my drums. If I click on pad mode, I've got my drum sounds. Now we know that I've got this hi-hat sound. We briefly mentioned note repeat earlier, but we haven't looked at the function. It's the main feature of the arpeggiator knob. If I hold note repeat down and hold a note, that note repeats. Again, using the navigation buttons and the encoder, I can affect various settings. The rate, 16ths, 32s, 8ths, the units, so triplets, dotted or normal, and so on and so forth. So if I want to record that in, I'm going to hold shift and record for my counting, and I can record some hi-hats in. Back to when we were talking about swing. If I click on swing and hold down my hi-hat button, I can affect the swing of that sample individually. Now if I pop that onto around 25% and then press play, you can hear that my hi-hats are no longer just they've got a little bit more swing to them and a little bit more rhythm. That's another great way of getting ideas down that you might not be so instinctively able to write out in note form down as an idea. Not only can I affect the swing of individual notes, but I can also affect the swing of the project overall. If I increase that to 25. You notice all the sounds in the project have now been given swing. However, the majority of them I want to stay straight, so I will keep that on 0. The last button we will look at in the mixing section is the plugin button. Now, what the plugin button does is allows us to control the various plugins on different sounds. So in this case, I have the option of controlling either my sampler or my compressor. I click my rotary coder in to choose the compressor, and I can now affect the different parameters of my compressor. Gain, source, filter, center filter, width, various different parameters of this compression I can control. Release, attack, amount, knee, and you can see as I twist my encoder on the screen, my knee changes. The very last thing I'm going to be doing here in this tutorial is we'll put a little bit of bass in, just because no little loop is complete without a bass. So I'll hold Control and I'll press on group 4 to create group D. I'll press my favorites and I will load in my how low bass. Click pattern, fresh pattern, and set the length to 4 bars. Click back on keyboard mode, shift and record to record in. And there we have it. We have a little idea down on paper that we can take into our arrangements. One final feature of Maschine that we'll briefly look at is how to sample the loops that you've made. Now, some of us will be using Maschine as a standalone project, but some of us may use it as a channel strip plugin inside of our already existing DAW. If I wanted to take out a loop that I wanted to from Maschine that I've created here and pop it into my DAW, or indeed onto a blank square in Maschine, I simply navigate to this wavy little button in the right hand corner. I click on it and hold to export. I can then drag this audio wherever I like. I could drag it, if I was running Ableton in the background, I could drag it into Ableton, but in this case, because I'm not running Ableton, I'll drag it onto square 8. I'll drop that in. Now, when I press pad number 8, you'll hear that I have the loop that I've created overall. You might notice that there's some reverbs on that, but that's because that was the existing plugins that were on that sound already. That will play out until it plays to the end of the 8 bars. Hopefully that gives you a nice overview of the features on the Maschine MK2 and gives you a great place to start out getting your ideas down. We'd love to hear from you guys, so if you've got any ideas or you've got any tracks that you've made, send us over and link us either in the comments or via a message. As always, subscribe and like. Thanks for watching. Cheers.